I call this meeting of Sylvania City Council for December 2nd, 2024 to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Fry?
Here.
Mr. Hanson?
Mr. Hanson is ill and excused.
Mr. Hanem?
Here.
Mr. McCann?
Here.
Mr. Richardson?
Here.
Ms. Stout?
Here.
Mrs. Westfall?
Here.
6 members of City Council are present, therefore a quorum does exist. Welcome to our guests here this evening. And Mr. Benjamin, you're going to speak shortly. So I invite you all to join us in our Pledge of Allegiance, this meeting led by Mrs. Westfall.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Additions to the agenda. We do have some additions tonight. As agenda item 4A, I would like to welcome Mr. Stephen Benjamin to come to the podium to discuss light pole outages around town, which was on my mind tonight as well. Not yet, not yet. We got to finish this part of the agenda first. And then as agenda item 11, the law director distributed ordinance 133, electronic monitoring. And as agenda item 12, ordinance 134, inside the 5 development agreement. Those are the additions that I have to the agenda. Mr. Fry.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Members of City Council, Mrs. Westfall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to add a committee report from the Employee and Community Relations Committee held on November 19th, 2024.
And this date as well. So
And today as well. There were 2
so we
meetings.
just
Yes,
had to add
correct.
November 19th.
Correct.
All right. Other changes from members or additions from members of City Council? Hearing none. Mr. Sanford,
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Chief Miller,
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
and Mr. Shaw,
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
and Ms. Bryant.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
All right, with that, is there a motion to approve our agenda as amended?
So moved. Second.
So moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda for this evening meeting is approved as amended. We're up to agenda item 4, which is approval of the council meeting minutes from November the 18th. Mr. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move approval of the meeting minutes of the council meeting of November 18th, 2024 as submitted.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve those November 18th meeting minutes as submitted. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and those meeting minutes are approved. Now, we had a request from Steve Benjamin to address us tonight on light pole outages around the community. It was on my mind tonight because I drove past 7 or 8 of them on my short trip to City Council chambers tonight. But Mr. Benjamin, you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Steve Benjamin. My address is 5863 Hideaway Lane, Sylvania, Ohio, 43560. And I want to thank the mayor and the president and council people for the opportunity to address you this evening. I only have a few short paragraphs to say, and because it's been a while since I've spoken in public, I'm going to use notes here. I'm not emailing people out here. This is about the issue of streetlights and safety. And first I want to thank Director Shaw for his good faith effort to address this issue and to try to move the machine as far and as fast as possible. So thank you. Our street light has been out for over 2 months. Toledo Edison has told us to call the city. The city says that they have a contract, meaning Toledo Edison, to replace all streetlights within a 2-year period of time. My understanding is that they are through about 25% of that period of time and about 25% through the plan. That means it may be a total of 18 more months or until May 2026 until our light is fixed and working. There's many seniors who live on my street near that street light, and I worry for their safety. You all know how early it gets dark, and we don't want to put more pressure on the police if there's all these light outages around our city. It is my understanding that the director has asked Toledo Edison to meet over 2 weeks ago with no response to his request. So the city has no information of the schedule to replace lights, or if there are plans, if any, to address the non-working street lights within that May 2026 period of time. I hope the mayor and council can be of assistance to citizens like me who live in the dark in Sylvania. Thank you for your time and efforts, and being a social worker with group practice. And if it's out of line, please tell me, how many of you have experienced street lights in your neighborhoods out? Okay. You can let the record show. That was everybody. So I'm not just speaking for us. I love Sylvania. It's the best decision I ever made to move here. I just wish I could see it at night. Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Coming to city council tonight, I passed 7 or 8 streetlights that were out, and I was gonna bring it up to Mr. Shaw and to the chief of police to discuss at Thursday's staff meeting. I've instructed the chief of police to have her night shift officers make an estimate of what percentage or what number of streetlights are out. The law director has been directed to read the contract and see what we can do to reduce our bills to Toledo Edison as a result of their non-performance on maintenance on the existing streetlights. Signing a contract to replace them does not relieve them of the responsibility to keep the ones working that didn't make it to the replacement. 3 of those streetlights were on my street, Mr. Benjamin. Just one north, 3 houses north of my house, 2 in the next block of Vicksburg, another couple over on Weldwood, 1 at the western end of Convent, and 2 in front of Northview High School, 1 at the entrance and 1 at the exit out of the front parking lot. It is not appropriate, and yet they're being paid for those, and we've got to take care of that. And you have, together, you've pushed it, together you and I are pushing it forward. The president of council is gonna step in. He knows someone that he might, with Toledo Edison, that might help push it forward, but we have a plan to up and ratchet up the pressure on them to take care of this. All right, thanks for taking the time to be here tonight. You're of course welcome to stay, but I wouldn't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Benjamin.
All right, that gets us back to our agenda item number 5, which is a final change order for the Oakland Court improvements. As Mr. Shaw makes his way to the podium, I would like to say that before this project started, I got very regular calls on the state of that street, and I expected many issues during construction. And I did not get one email, text, or telephone call during construction. So it must have been well handled by your office and by the contractor as well.
That's great. Glad to hear that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This project went exceptionally well. Sometimes these cul-de-sac reconstructs with only one way in and out are really difficult and challenging for residents. We did have our few that we had to work through, but for the most part, this was a really, really well executed project. So real pleased with how it looks in the finished product. We have some touch-up work to do in the spring, but scope of work is completed. I bring to you in change order number 1 final. Our original contract with Sal & Bean Trucking and Excavating was $417,305.75. After all of our quantities have been installed and we've resolved all of the pay items, I'm pleased to bring to you a decrease to that contract in the amount of $25,616.99. The bulk of that came with less than anticipated subgrade stabilization for the road. This is kind of an iffy spot in Sylvania where we transition from clay to sand. This one had more sand, ironically,
Which
which
is
was,
surprising based on the way those concrete slabs had offset.
yep. So really good to find the condition of it, so we were able to save about $16,000 and not having to replace subgrade that was poor. And that was most of the savings on the list. The other quantities are shown in your packet there, but I would request approval of the change order to decrease the contract amount from $417,305.75 to $391,688.76.
The water line on the north side of the street was replaced as a part of this project, I believe.
Correct.
And as a result, all the flowering trees on the north side of the road were also lost. And the administration made a commitment to replace those trees, possibly in the spring, not now. But I wanted to make sure that those are in your plans.
Yes, actually, we talked to the south side owners as well, because they had the same type of trees on the south side.
Flowering trees.
Several of them didn't want them back either, so we took our Parks and Forestry crews over there just maybe like a month ago and removed those trees. We took the stumps out last week. We'll be doing a tree replacement planting in the spring for both sides of the street.
And of course, one tree in that well-positioned island at the west end cul-de-sac,
Yes.
possibly a fir tree. That's what was discussed with the residents, right?
Question, if I might.
Unanimity as to have that island or not.
And this might be directed to either the mayor or yourself. The monies that we've saved on the projects, we've had a few of these come under budget. Does the money go back to the general fund or back to the CIP?
Capital improvement, that's where it came out of.
So we
We've
go,
had a few overages as well. At the end of the year, it'll get balanced out. Mr. Schroyer is not here tonight to discuss that, but typically we have a year-end ordinance that tries to balance those funds in and out.
thank you.
So we do, Mr. Aller and you have been coming back with quite a few deductions, but I remember an increase here last meeting or the meeting before.
Yeah, we do pretty good. Sometimes we don't get them all, but we do pretty good.
We just, it's not like there's money coming back. We encumber the funds and we just don't pay it. Right, okay.
And they are capital improvement funds, they're not general fund dollars. Okay, with that, we do have ordinance 129, 2024 to approve this final deduct change order. Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is ordinance number 129, 2024. I'll read by title only. Authorizing the mayor and director of finance to approve change order number 1 final to this city's agreement with Sound Bean Trucking and Excavating, Inc. for the Oakland Court Improvement Project, decreasing the contract amount by $25,616.99. I move passage of the emergency measure.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded for passage of ordinance number 129, 2024 as an emergency measure. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and ordinance 129, 2024 is enacted as an emergency measure. Agenda item 5 is proposed ordinance 130, 2025, amending chapter 945, Parks of Sylvania. And Chief, I understand that you worked with the law director on this and requested some changes to clarify the rules about overnight stays in the parks. Could you give us an update on that? Sure.
So what kind of precipitated this was, we had an individual that was sleeping in our park on Maplewood during extended periods of the daytime, which is when the parks are open, when we want our residents there. So in looking at what that was, I started looking at our parks regulations and realized that they're all from the 1970s. And looking back on some of the complaints that we've had here in recent years with people building forts, for lack of better terms, and structures on, we've been lucky they've been on private properties. They haven't been in a city park or anything like that, but we are open for not having regulations to regulate that type of living arrangements if they were to move into one of our parks. So that's when I reached out to the law director and director of safety, and we kind of went over everything and saw where we were lacking, and we could clarify some things.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions for the chief on that one? It does affect, as you can see, several sections in that chapter. I've read them over, hopefully you have too, and I don't think there's anything controversial in there. The administration requests approval tonight of ordinance 130, 2024, and I'm asking Mr. McCann to read this in Mr. Kansas absence.
Mr. Mayor, just want to note that we have a new exhibit to the ordinance.
The law director replaced and exhibited it. Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Along with these definitions that we're adding to the zoning code, that we might add to the zoning code, in the research for these, could you tell me a little bit more about where you got these codes from and what might happen in a circumstance if someone is staying in the park?
As far as the codes, the law director reached out to some similar things.
Yeah, I apologize, Lindsay, I can't remember the communities that I pulled the codes from, and
Okay.
I've been working on them off and on for a couple of months, so I can get them to you. I have them back at my office, but I'm drawing a total blank. There
Yeah,
were three
there were
communities that we
comparable
looked at.
communities around, I
Yeah.
think Columbus was
Right.
area.
Yeah.
Okay.
I usually look at Dublin, that's always kind of a
Yeah.
go-to for
And
me.
it wasn't just that we went out and said, this is what they're doing, we looked at and compared and tried to build what would fit our community and what we wanted. And one of them was for like a municipal park system.
Right,
Which
right.
actually has a campground, which, you know, a lot of that doesn't come into play with us.
I guess the thought that jumps in my mind with this, and maybe maybe I'm not reading it in the same way, is that this could come into play if there were to be those without homes that were to possibly stay there. And I guess I am simply saying they can't be there. I'm curious what the
No.
next step would
No,
be.
the encouragement is we want the people to enjoy our parks. We want them to come in. We don't want them to move into our parks. And the encouragement is, this gives our officers some enforcement powers to say, look, you can't live in our park. You can come enjoy our park system just like anyone else. You can't come here and set up your tent and sleep from 8 till dark and then go walk our city streets all night. If that's the case, then we have the resources to put them in touch with the local, you know, Cherry Street Mission, St. Paul's. We can get them the assistance they need. We can get them headed that way. So it gives us a chance to talk to them and explain things and work with them to help them if that is their situation.
I guess that's what I was wondering, is what was
No,
that step?
no, by all means,
If there is that instance.
this is not, the intent behind this is not to give us the ability to run out and arrest people just because they're laying on a park bench. The intent is to find out what's going on, and if this is a situation, then we can explain to them what our rules are, how we do things, and find out if they need assistance in how we can find community help for them. So,
Thank you, I appreciate the clarification.
We don't just drive them to the city limits
no.
and say go away.
Because that doesn't really solve the problem.
And that's what we want to do, is solve the problem, not allow it to keep precipitating.
You may have read the Supreme Court decision in June of this year, upholding laws like this, and I think that was Grant Pass, Oregon. And I commend you on the legislation. It's something I've been thinking about bringing up anyway, so I'm glad you're ahead of me.
Thank you. Mr. McCain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce by title only ordinance number 130-2024, amending chapter 945 parks of the Sylvania codified ordinances 1979, as amended by amending section 945.02, hours, rules, and regulations, by adding section 945.07, removal or destruction of property and natural features, by adding section 945.08, fires, by adding section 945.09, unauthorized structures, and by adding section 945.10, unlawful camping, storage of personal property, or sleeping in public places. I move passage of ordinance number 130-2024 as an emergency measure.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded for passage of ordinance number 130, 2024 as an emergency measure. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and ordinance 130, 2024 is enacted as an emergency measure. I have a story. It's not the same thing at all, but I did have kids build a fort behind my office along the Ottawa Creek down in the floodplain. And I had to decide, well, am I gonna worry about that or not? And I chose not to. They weren't doing any harm. However, I wondered how long it would last. It lasted till the next flood, and the flood took care of it just fine.
Yep.
So that one worked out as well. But people like to be in those natural spaces, no doubt about it. Okay, we're up to agenda item 7. This is ordinance 131, 2024. This is an ordinance to have after-hours canine control services by the acting dog warden of Lucas County. Chief, you need this to be able to call when you have a dog problem.
Yes.
And this is,
Outside of Monday through Friday, 8 to 4.
this is an extension or a renewal of existing contract.
It's just a 1-year renewal, we've previously done 3-year renewals, but, since there's an acting dog warden, I believe he's taking a little bit of operation, and so I would expect, but it is a 1-year renewal with no increase in cost.
Mr. Fry has indicated because it is an agreement with the Lucas County Commissioners, he would like to withdraw from the table due to a possible conflict of interest. I need a motion to allow Mr. Fry to push back from the table.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor of that indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries, and let the record show that. And then for passage of ordinance 131, 2024, I call Mr. McCann as a member of the Safety Committee to read that one as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce by title only ordinance number 131-2024, authorizing the mayor and director of finance to enter into an agreement with the Board of County Commissioners of Lucas County, Ohio, for after-hours canine control services by the acting dog warden of Lucas County, Ohio, in title only. I move for passage of ordinance number 131-2024 as an emergency measure.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded for passage of ordinance number 131, 2024 as an emergency measure. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and ordinance 131, 2024 is enacted as an emergency measure. Thank you. We are now up to agenda item 8. This is, I would like the law director to address this, but this is for a new tax incremental finance. No, yes.
Yes, that's correct, Mayor. It's an amendment to the ordinance that was passed at the last meeting. Mr. Sanford can also address this.
Thanks, Leslie. I discovered after our last meeting that I didn't have all the correct information that we need to have in the ordinance in regards to the establishment of the TIF. So in getting with our consultant on this, Mr. Grisdale, and I asked for him to communicate with Leslie so we could get it right, so we're not having any problems going forward with the TIF, and that's what we're trying to do with this ordinance here tonight.
That's right. The main, the primary thing that was changed was, if you recall, in the downtown TIF that was created, we make the schools whole starting in year 10. This TIF, we make the schools whole immediately. So that's the difference, and that's the reason for the requested amendment to the ordinance.
And the school board is on board supporting.
That's correct, yep.
All right, any questions for Mr. Sanford or Ms. Whiting? Mr. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce ordinance number 132, 2024, and read by title only. Repealing ordinance number 127, 2024, declaring the improvement to certain parcels of real property to be a public purpose and exempt from taxation, and providing for the collection and deposit of certain payments into the tax increment equivalent fund, and specifying the public infrastructure improvements directly benefiting the parcels. I move for passage of ordinance number 132, 2024 as an emergency measure.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded for passage of ordinance 132, 2024 as an emergency measure. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and ordinance 132, 2024 is enacted as an emergency measure. And let the record show that Mr. Fry returns to the table with the completion of that issue. We're now up to agenda item 9, committee reports, and as 9A, Mrs. Westfall has 2 committee reports from November 19th and this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, our first meeting from discussions on the BZA interviews was Tuesday, November 19th, 2024, 6 p.m. Present were committee members Mary Westfall, Marcus Hanson, Doug Hanem, Patrick Richardson, and Mark Fry joined us at that meeting. There were a couple of additions to the agenda as we started the meeting. One is an addition to discuss the Stranahan All-Inclusive Playground, and the other one was to discuss a question on LGBTQ legislation or legislation policies in the city of Sylvania. There were 2 positions open on the BZA, and both of the candidates that were currently in those positions were invited to apply. One chose not to apply, Gary Summer. He has been on the BZA for 10 terms, which would be 20 years. And he just felt it was time for him to step aside and get on to some other things in his own personal life. So he chose not to apply. The only applicant we actually did have was Tom Reynolds, who also currently serves on the BZA. Tom shared that he has been serving on the BZA, and he feels that it meets a very important community need. When there is an issue and it arises, he always makes a site visit and reviews the city's ordinances regarding that issue. The committee does not meet frequently, maybe once or twice a year. It is a committee that meets on an as-needed basis. So he is interested in continuing to serve. Tom is a former Sylvania firefighter, and he has 3 daughters, 1 in the service and 2 living here in Sylvania. After some discussion, Mr. Hanem moved to request legislation be prepared to appoint Tom Reynolds to the next term for the BZA, and that was seconded by Patrick Richardson, and the motion passed. With that said, we then needed to set a meeting for further discussion. We had a couple of people that we talked about as possible candidates to reach out to for the other seat that continues to be open, and one person has expressed interest. So we set a meeting for tonight, December 2nd, at 7 p.m. to interview another potential candidate. And Patrick moved that we have that meeting, and then Marcus Hanson seconded, and that motion passed. Marcus Hanson also then brought up a discussion about the Stranahan All-Inclusive Playground. They have successfully reached $510,000 of their $650,000 goal. They've got many donors. I do have a list with me if anybody wants me to pass that around. I'd be happy to do that after my report. Sylvania Township and the Sylvania City Schools have made substantial contributions and donations to the park, and the committee had a lengthy discussion about that and is recommending that City Council consider making a $10,000 donation to the Stranahan All-Inclusive Playground. So with that being done, let me see, Doug made the motion that we have City Council provide that support for the playground, and then Patrick Richards, or Marcus Hanson made the motion, Doug Hanem seconded, and the motion did pass. Then there was an additional discussion focused on community members' request that the city put in place some additional protections for the LGBT community members. The committee had, again, a lengthy discussion and reviewed the policies in the city and determined that proper protections are in place. and a letter or an email will go out from the law director and myself to that individual, letting him know, what the city's policies are. Doug moved to adjourn at 7 PM. Marcus seconded, and that motion passed, and the meeting adjourned. So I do have a couple things that I need to have, make motions on with this, but I'd like to give the second report as well, and then I'll do all of the motions, if that's acceptable. So the second meeting was tonight, and it was, again, to discuss the BZA appointments, and that meeting was at 7 PM. Present for the meeting, myself, Mary Westfall, Doug Hayne, and Patrick Richardson. We do have one candidate who has expressed interest, but he will not be available to come for an interview until December 16th. So Patrick moved that the committee meet on December 16th at 7:15 PM. And Doug seconded that motion, and the motion passed. So we have another meeting regarding the BZA appointment. We did have one other piece of business that surfaced. The Sage-Yard Board appointment for the representative from the city of Sylvania is up again. Sean Murphy is our current representative at the table, or one of our current representatives. He has served only one term on the Sage-Yard Board and has asked to be reappointed. The committee had a discussion about that. Doug moved that we request that legislation be prepared for Sean Murphy to be reappointed to the Sage-Yard Board. Patrick seconded that, and that motion passed. Patrick moved to adjourn the meeting at 7:10, and Doug seconded it, and the meeting was adjourned at 7:10. So, a lot there. I'd like to make a couple of motions. I think that we'll need motions. One is to request that I move that we request legislation be prepared for Tom Reynolds to be appointed to the BZA.
So moved.
Seconds.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
I also request that legislation be prepared to support the Stranahan All-Inclusive Playground with a donation of $10,000 from the city of Sylvania.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and the law director will prepare that.
And then I make a motion that legislation be prepared that Sean Murphy be reappointed to the Sage-Yard Board for his second term. And
So moved.
Second.
Again, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and prepare the legislation for that as well.
And finally, I move that we set a meeting for this Employee Community Relations Committee for Monday, December 16th at 7:15 PM in the police conference room.
Wouldn't that be a-
Second.
Did someone, second.
Just need a second.
Sorry, I was waiting for Brian to say something.
Just set that meeting on December 16th for the.
7 PM?
7:15.
7:15. All in favor of that, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the clerk will post that committee meeting as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your report and your work on this. Are there any other committee reports to be made at this time? Or committee referrals? That takes us down to added agenda item 11, which was distributed at your places tonight. The first one being ordinance 133, 2024. This is for electronic monitoring, requested by Judge Bonfiglio. First, I'd like to have Mrs. Branding report on this.
Thank you, Mayor. We've had, Lucas County operates the electronic monitoring program for all of the county and municipal courts. And we've had an agreement with them for the past at least 4 years. And they've requested an extension of the agreement. The proposed new agreement is about a $7,000 increase in cost, but it does provide about 20 more electronic monitoring units and about 5 more alcohol monitoring devices. And the judge has requested that the agreement be approved. So it does cost about $220,000 a year. There are some monies available, I believe, through the defendants are supposed to pay for it. And also, I believe there's some money available through the indigent funding. But I'm not exactly sure how that all breaks down and what the city's cost is on that, but.
We would hope that the judge would enforce as best as he can the offending parties paying for this monitoring, which allows them to move about freely, but recognize the courts and our responsibility for those that cannot. Questions for the law director concerning this issue? Hearing none, this is again a contract with the Lucas County Commissioners, and Mr. Fry has requested to be allowed to push back from the table just to avoid any possible appearance of conflict of interest. I need a motion to that.
So moved. Second.
Seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries, and the record should show Mr. Fry is not at the table with us for this ordinance 133, 2024. And I call upon another member of the safety committee, Mrs. Westfall, to read this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce ordinance number 133-2024, authorizing the mayor and director of finance to enter into an agreement for electronic monitoring services for Sylvania Municipal Court with the Board of Commissioners of Lucas County, Ohio. I move passage of ordinance number 133, 2024 as an emergency measure.
Second.
Moved and seconded for passage of ordinance number 133, 2024 as an emergency measure. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and ordinance 133, 2024 is enacted as an emergency measure. Let the record show that Mr. Fry has rejoined us at the table. We are up to added agenda item 12, which is ordinance 134, 2024. This has to do with the Inside the Five development agreement, which we've discussed a few times previously in executive committee, but the law director has a report to make publicly tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. After going back and forth with Inside the Five's attorney a few times over the last few months, I believe we have a good second amendment to develop an agreement for you to consider. It took into consideration the comments that were made, and included in the development plan is the completion date will be March 1st, 2026. The right of first refusal will be 3 years after the completion date, and the option for the purchase price is capped at $500,000. So I believe that incorporates and addresses all of our concerns. And in order to keep the project moving forward, I would request that we move forward and pass this.
I have asked Mr. Shaw to be in contact with Lucas County Building Regulations to confirm the status of their building permit, which he's done. You want to give the report, Joe?
They've submitted the project at building regs. They're waiting on the zoning certificate to be released from us. They can't issue the building permit until our zoning certificate is done. We've been pushing them really hard to get on the December Board of Architectural Review agenda for review and consideration. I understand that most materials have been submitted and they're ready to go. So we'll conduct the meeting at the Board of Architectural Review. Should that pass, the zoning certificate can be released, and then that kind of releases the obligation to give them the building permit that they need.
Questions or comments from members of City Council?
I'm glad that it's at this stage. Thank you for your hard work. Certainly, city administration had to make a heavy lift on this, and we appreciate that. And I think it looks good to me.
They do have construction, two piles of construction fencing that have been laying over there for a while. We'd like to see them get started, though we all just hit the winter construction season pretty suddenly. But we'll see what we can get done. And again, that Board of Architectural Review is a week from Wednesday night, 5:30 in these chambers, and I would not anticipate a problem, but you never know. That committee thinks on their own. All right. We do have ordinance 134, 2024 to approve this second amendment to the development agreement, and I call upon Lindsay Stow to read this one as building and grounds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce ordinance number 134, 2024, and read by title only. Authorizing the mayor and the director of finance to enter into a second agreement enter into a second amendment to development agreement on behalf of the city of Sylvania with First Brookside LLC for the property located at 5705 to 5711 North Main Street, Sylvania, Ohio. I move for passage of ordinance number 134, 2024 as an emergency measure.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for passage of ordinance number 134, 2024 as an emergency measure. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and ordinance 134, 2024 is enacted as an emergency measure. That brings us to the end of our agenda items, and there are no information items. However, before calling for adjournment, I have been contemplating a decision of mine for more than a year, and would like to let you know what my decision is. And I have a statement here I'm going to read about that. It is always difficult to know when to retire and to leave a wonderful and productive part of your life behind, and to move on to new and undiscovered possibilities and futures. After much thought, I've decided the end of this year is the right time for me to retire from the mayor's office on my own schedule, on my own terms, for the right reasons, and to provide a smooth transition for the city. As I retire, the city of Sylvania is in great shape, in great hands, and has great expectations for the future. So much is right in the city of Sylvania and the promising years to come. The city continues to be a great place to live, work, and raise a family. The city's finances are strong. Our workforce is talented, efficient, and dedicated. Our infrastructure is being maintained and improved every day. Our relationships with our neighboring communities have never been better, and our long-term utility and service contracts have been improved and renewed. Being mayor of Sylvania for 29 years has been the greatest privilege of my life. I have met so many wonderful people, both residents and officials, and successfully faced many challenges and opportunities with them. I have met presidents, governors, mayors, federal and state legislators, city council members, township trustees, county commissioners, board members, managers, directors, and so many more wonderful and creative people. Many have become cherished and continuing friends who I would never have met otherwise, and will never forget. I will miss working with them and facing challenges together, but look forward to a new and exciting future with more time to explore other long-delayed interests and possibilities. Thank you to everyone who has helped, supported, and guided me over the years and helped me do the best job for the Sylvania community. I have been one of the luckiest people on earth to have served in Sylvania. It has been the honor and privilege of my life to serve 10 years on Sylvania City Council and 29 years as Sylvania's mayor. Surely one of the best jobs in Northwest Ohio. Thank you for listening. My condolences to Mr. Fry. I will continue on as mayor through the end of this month, but then Mark will assume responsibility. I will submit a letter of resignation on January 31st in a ceremony with the law director, Mr. Fry, in which case Mr. Fry will be sworn in as the mayor beginning January 1st.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may, I know that I speak for all members of City Council, administrative staff, and the broader community. You have spent the vast majority of your adult life serving our city.
And the campground promise is to leave things better than you found them. And you have gone way beyond that. And we and the citizens of Sylvania are deeply in your gratitude for all the service that you have provided to our community for all these years. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Mr. Fry. Again, it's been my privilege. And I will miss these meetings and all of you very much. And I'll be around still. And we'll still take advantage of a bully pulpit if I need to.
I may call you about the streetlights, Mayor.
And we were talking about that tonight. How can I ratchet up the pressure on them? We will. And Mr. Fry knows how to do it as well. All right, with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and we stand adjourned until our next meeting 2 weeks from tonight on Monday, December 16th at 7:30 PM.